sort of I can't quite imagine. But one of the exercises is a single leg balance on a pillow is a great way to strengthen ankles. I can't imagine a single balance on a pillow being good for anything, really.
I have to say, I have 2 collapsed arches from being pregnant with my 2 beautiful children. My feet went up a whole shoe size after being pregnant. I thought, what's gone on? No, apparently collapsed arch, so
yes.
Lucky me. Right, and let's talk about the secret to a perfect gravy.
It's a jus, that's a bit of gravy.
Well, exactly. Being a southerner, see, I like a jus. Yes, exactly.
I love a jus.
But no, we've got some. So a
Married out.
a chef from Sheffield who has got a secret to a gravy is there's 30 different ingredients that go into a proper gravy, and he has luckily for us and he has given us his menu. It's only got 22 ingredients. It's fantastic. Well, it's a lot of sort of Asian sort of stuff. I mean, this is from beef. There's Chinese 5 spice, common seaweed, smoked and dried.
Sounds rubbish. Doesn't sound like a gravy. I'll tell you what, I've got the best burrito. He's got million recipes. It's made hard for us. No, he's talking about some exclusively reveal the details of the thing he's doing with DNA.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, thank you to everybody for listening today. Our producers were Rob Guinness and Lewis Decker. Technical operators were Ryan Brannigan and Chris Gray. Matt Shawley will be here next week. Chances are best.
The UK on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
I'm Giles Corran. It's 1 o'clock. It's now time for the latest news on Times Radio.
Thanks, Giles. Good afternoon. Under 40s are to be offered an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation is advising the change after concerns over very rare blood clots. Speaking at a press briefing this morning, MHRA Chief Executive Dr June Rain says the balance of benefits and risks is very favourable for older people, but is more finely balanced for the younger generation.
I can confirm today that the position of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency remains unchanged, that the benefits of the AstraZeneca vaccine against COVID-19, with the associated risks of hospitalisation and death, continue to outweigh the risks of the vaccine for the vast majority of people.
Labour have described a defeat in the Hartlepool by-election as absolutely shattering. The Conservatives won with a majority of almost 7,000 in a constituency held by Labour for 47 years. Our head of news, David Spencer, has more.
Gillian Wendy Mortimer, commonly known as Jill Mortimer, Conservative Party candidate, 15,520.
While the victory might not have been a shock, the scale of it certainly was. The Conservatives winning with a swing from Labour of more than 16%. In doing so, Jill Mortimer becoming the town's first ever Tory MP.
It's a truly historic result and a momentous day.
Elsewhere, votes are still being counted across Britain in elections for the Scottish and Welsh parliaments, as well as local councils in England. Labour have lost dozens of council seats, but in the first mayoral race result, Ros Jones held on to Doncaster for the party. Counting has started in the Scottish Parliament election, with more than half of the country's constituencies expected to declare later today.
And Boris Johnson has just been giving his reaction.
I know that the results have been coming in since this morning, and clearly a lot more to go in its early days, but a very encouraging set of results so far. And I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities, bouncing back from the pandemic as far as we can, getting through it.
Steve Reid is the Shadow Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. He's been telling Times Radio the Hartlepool result is devastating.
There's no ducking the fact that Hartlepool is a shattering result for the Labour Party. To lose a seat like Hartlepool that's been Labour for over half a century, I'm gutted.
Kent police have released an image of a man they say could be key to the investigation into the death of Julia James. The police community support officer's body was discovered in woodland close to her home in the village of Snowdown near Dover 10 days ago. The 53-year-old died from serious head injuries. So far there have been no arrests. The fire has ravaged a 19-storey tower block in Poplar in East London. A number of people have been treated for injuries. 125 firefighters tackled the blaze near Canary Wharf, which engulfed 3 floors. We're hoping to find out today which countries we can travel to without having to quarantine. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps is holding a press conference this afternoon. Visitors to places on the green list can return to England without having to self-isolate, although they will still have to take a COVID test. EasyJet's chief executive, Johan Lundgren, believes the majority of European countries should be on the green list.
It's not fair that the British public should be left behind when other European member states are allowing their people and their consumers to start travelling now without any restrictions at all if they're vaccinated.
Sunny spells and scattered showers this afternoon. Heavy and sundry showers in the north and east. The sunniest and warmest conditions in the south. And our top sports story this hour, Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta has apologised to fans after his side were knocked out of the European League semi-finals by the Spanish club Villarreal. We'll have a full sports roundup at past.
Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker, this is Giles Coram on Times Radio.
Hello and welcome to the show, which today comes to you live from Hartlepool, where Mark Dolan and I will be digging deep and forensically into what went wrong. All right, I suppose, depending on your position on these things. We will be talking to all the candidates, as well as the party leaders, and vox-popping everyone from ice cream vendor Barry here on the seafront to the goalkeeper of Hartlepool United and Peter Mandelson himself, the man who mistook the mushy peas for guacamole on his only visit here during his 54 years as its MP. It's the biggest political story of the decade, and this wouldn't be the Giles Coram Show if we weren't going to take it very seriously indeed. Not really. Today's show is in fact all about cowpats, sheepdogs, noodles, dumplings and snail porridge. Or should that be dog dumplings, snail noodles and cowpat porridge? Who knows? You'll have unpicked from that, I hope, if you're any sort of foodie, that one of my guests today is Heston Blumenthal. He will be here at 3:30 to exclusively reveal the details of his upcoming collaboration with the Victoria and Albert Museum. Reliving, nobody said it was all fun. Everyone seems to be moving out there post-COVID, don't they, Mark? But I don't think they grasp what's in store for them. I will ask her about this, about whether townies can ever go and live in the country. What about you? Could you do it?
Well, you're stuck with the car. You can't walk anywhere. I'm a keen runner, and the worst place to go running is in the countryside. You need London, you need traffic lights, you need pavements.
You need traffic lights so you know where to go.
You do, you absolutely, you need smog. I find it's better actually for aerobically to have something to fight against with your lungs.
I know what you mean about running in the countryside, because I go to the country quite a lot. I'm going this weekend. It's finally legal. And I'm not a crazy runner, but I like to run. In the countryside, they don't have pavements.
Correct.
So where are you supposed to go? It's very easy in London. Pad down the pavements and the people jump out of your way. In the countryside, you have to run on road, and there's always things come shooting round.
Tractors.
Yeah, tractors.
Yeah, you will never win a duel with a tractor or a 4x4.
Do have a dog. If you notice that whenever there's about 4 or 5 old people a year get trampled by herds of cattle, and they always say that the dog was worrying the cattle, and then the cattle charged the dog, and the old man went to help the dog. Why am I going in this direction? I don't know. And the man always gets trampled. It's the same thing with the ponds. It's always the dog that goes in the pond, and then the man follows it in.
How
it's
embarrassing! It's always unfortunate to die as a result of an attack from any animal, of course. But how annoying would it be to be killed by a cow, a famously docile creature? It's not great on the sort of gravestone.
No, it is
death by cow. You know, if you're going to be taken down by an animal, you want it to be a snow leopard.
Yeah, do you? I mean, or a polo or a panda or something like that. Should we do it? Should we put it? Because
A grizzly bear.
It's always good. That's always yeah, but that happens quite a bit actually. I think.
But that's fine. It's a good way to go.
Do you think we should do a list of the good ways to die? Because one of my problems with COVID is they always go, and so many people have sadly died, and that really annoys me because sadly is built into the word died.
Yes.
Unless you're killed by like an otter. Yes. In which case he comedically died. It's the by the way, we could talk about death. Whether or not it's fitting, I don't know. We had an SMS already from someone called Moni, M-O-N-Y, Moni. It's short for Monica, no doubt. So looking forward to 3 hours of official inappropriateness. Can't tell you how much you cheer me up, Giles. She's divided inappropriateness into 2 words. Inappropriateness. like Loch Ness. It's
Rules
like
are there to be broken.
a whole lake of things. Would that be inappropriate?
What the reason why you're very popular and the reason why that wonderful listener tunes in is because you're not woke. And neither is Boris Johnson, and that's why he stormed to electoral victory.
You segued into an actual story. I was joking a little.
Yesterday
Anyway.
it wasn't about the economy. It wasn't about politics. It was about culture. It was the death of wokeism yesterday.
Do you think it was because of
virtue signalling, hand-wringing, pious nonsense from the Labour Party? Don't take my word for it. The people of Hartlepool have said no, and it's a Labour partner.
And this is the thing, because the whole nation of the heartland we use
it's
now.
He, her, she, him, all of that stuff. And there's nothing wrong. Here's what's misunderstood about wokeism. Some people who are very, very liberal-minded, essentially kind of socialists, and very right-on. Well, those people have always existed. You have always had right-on people. You've always had lovies and lefties. But the problem with wokeism is the evangelical nature of it, that it polices other people's behaviour and thoughts, and the public have said no.
But I think, well, possibly. I think it's more that they sort of don't care and don't hear. Because
they don't want to be told what to say or think. And they don't want their language policed. They don't want to go on a course that says they're a bigot.
But that would be, but why in London? I assume they're going to return Sadiq Khan.
Yes.
We.
London's the opposite.
So we do want to be told.
Yes, exactly.
Out there in Hartlepool.
London is going to be a kind of communist paradise.
Because that's really strange, because it doesn't mean that it's all about culture, it's not about class anymore. You're saying the concerns of the Labour Party under Corbyn, it began, it continues under Keir Starmer, are just simply not the concerns of what they used to call the heartlands, which suggests post-industrial, which there are no solutions to whatever the problems in Hartlepool are.
Yes, and I think that extreme political correctness is something that really bothers me.
Do you think that really? Do you really think that's what they reject?
Yeah, I do. Look, for example, can we agree that racism is the most evil strain of humanity? It's the worst thing that we must fight for every second of every day. That racism is the worst thing ever, and unfortunately it's everywhere, and it is in this country. But the issue around, for example, the element which has an element which can embrace Black Lives Matter, who doesn't agree with that? I'll get the t-shirt, I'll get a tattoo. But
Mariag struck the woodwork, but that was as close as it got. The Spanish side will now look to the final, which takes place later this month in Gdansk. And Dan Evans missed out on a place in the quarterfinals of the Madrid Open and a meeting with Rafael Nadal after a straight sets defeat by Alexander Zverev. The British #1 paid the price for a one-sided first set as he was beaten 6-3, 7-6.
News Radio UK. For the latest news in Bristol, listen on your smart speaker.
Following the impasse between the French and UK governments over fishing rights off the Channel Island of Jersey, the EU has called for calm. Spokesperson Daniel Ferry says diplomacy needs to work to resolve the issues.
We are now engaging in good faith with the UK to try and solve the situation. That's the point that we're at right now, and I don't think it would be right for me or for us to say anything else beyond that point right now.
The girl's been arrested after she shot 2 students and a custodian at her Idaho school before being disarmed by a teacher. Officials told a news conference that the 3 are expected to survive their injuries. The 6th grade pupil pulled a handgun from her backpack and fired multiple rounds both inside and outside Rigby Middle School in the small city of Rigby in the US. Japan will expand and extend a state of emergency in Tokyo and other areas to the 31st of May. Coronavirus is continuing to spread in the country, and uncertainty is growing about safely holding the Olympics in just 11 weeks' time. The Maldives' first president, Mohamed Nasheed, has been injured in an explosion outside his home and taken to hospital. The 53-year-old, who's the current Parliament Speaker and was the country's first democratically elected president, is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries. A prank TV show in Iraq that lured guests into simulated ambushes by militants forcing participants and viewers to experience some of the terror that was widespread under the rule of the so-called Islamic State group has been ordered off air. The show's cancellation followed widespread outrage from viewers. And Coldplay have premiered their new single with the help of French astronaut Thomas Pesquet, who's on board the International Space Station. A special performance of Higher Power was sent up to the ISS, where it was given its first play.
Showbiz.
Dame Darcy Bussell has ruled out a permanent return to Strictly, but says it would be lovely to be back as a guest judge. The ballerina joined the judging panel full-time in 2012 after making several guest appearances. Dame Darcy has organised a gala at the Royal Albert Hall, which will showcase 8 British ballet companies that will take place in June. So Ian McKellen says his work improved after he came out. The actor revealed his sexuality back in 1988 and says that after that point he could be himself, noting that up until then his acting was really him being with skills. A boost for the live music scene with a new survey finding the majority of music fans would be happy to show COVID certification to attend a live event. Some 75% of people surveyed say they have no problem being asked to show evidence of a negative test or vaccination, as long as they're allowed in. And Ed Sheeran's been announced as the new shirt sponsor for Ipswich Town Football Club. He grew up in Framlington, just outside the town. He's agreed an initial 1-year deal.
Business.
New figures suggest that retailers are unlikely to see a return to pre-pandemic numbers of customers anytime soon, despite the beginnings of a recovery after non-essential shops reopened. Total UK footfall for the month to the 1st of May remained 40% down on the same month in 2019, despite the reopening of retail according to the BRC Sensormatic IQ figures. Retail parks continue to fare better than shopping centres and high streets, as they benefited from large stores, more space and on-site parking. The UK must use new laws to ensure online platforms have a legal responsibility to protect users from an avalanche of scams. That's according to a coalition of groups who've written an open letter to the government. The 17 groups have urged politicians to include scams in the proposed online safety bill, which could be announced in next week's Queen's speech. And Sainsbury's has hired the former boss of John Lewis, Paula Nichols, to take charge of its clothing and homeware operations. She's taking over in June from Mike Look.
Goodwin Barrett has helped thousands of people get to the truth and the compensation they deserve. If you've lost money on a stocks and shares ISA sold by a bank, text LOST to 78900.
News Radio UK. Weather.
Sunny spells with just isolated light showers this afternoon, locally heavy at times with a risk of hail. It should be a little warmer today than yesterday.
Travel.
Problems on the M1 northbound around Leicester junctions 21A to 22 and around 40 minutes of queuing traffic. Just due to the accident which happened earlier on. On the M3 westbound junction 2 to 3 coming away from the M25, we've got a vehicle fire there. 2 lanes closed as a result. In Lancashire, major problems on the A56, delays southbound past Haslingden towards Ealing Bridge. This is because of the M66 being closed from Ealing through to Junction 1. Busy on the surrounding areas as a result. And the Forth Road Bridge remains closed in both directions for essential maintenance work today. Diversions via the Queen's Ferry Crossing. That's the latest. I'm Roy Martin.
As a possible side effect of the jab, something that's understood to occur in 10 people per million doses administered. Professor Lim is the COVID-19 chairman of the JCVI, and he explains what it means for an alternative to be given where possible.
The AstraZeneca vaccine is very helpful in that it requires less stringent transport and storage conditions. The AstraZeneca vaccine may be the only vaccine that is practical to offer in in those circumstances, the AstraZeneca vaccine should indeed be the preferred vaccine.
Over 100 firefighters are tackling a blaze on a tower block in London that's covered in flammable cladding. More than 20 fire engines are at the scene near Canary Wharf, and it's understood a number of people are being treated for injuries, although the extent of which is not yet known. Residents have reported the building was covered in the same type of cladding as Grenfell Tower. For the first time since its creation, Hartlepool constituency has been won over by the Tories in the by-election.
We knew it was going to be a very, very tough fight. You just never know. The only poll that counts is the one that took place yesterday. And again, I'm just overwhelmed by the support of the people of Hartlepool. My priority is the people of Hartlepool and making sure we turn this amazing town back on the ground.
That was newly elected Jill Mortimer. She defeated the Labour candidate by almost 7,000 votes. Kent police have released an image of a man who could be key in the investigation into the murder of PCSO Julia James. The 53-year-old was found dead in Accord Wood on the 27th of April. Police are appealing for witnesses or anyone who knows the man to come forward with information. And workers at Kellogg's definitely have that Friday feeling. They're being encouraged to leave at noon on Fridays to help them switch off during summer.
Sport.
Manchester United are into the Europa League final despite losing to Roma in the second leg of their semi-final. Cavani gave Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side the lead before the break, but the Italian side hit back to win 3-2 on the night. Overall, United won the tie 8-5 on aggregate. And it wasn't to be for an all-English final, as Arsenal couldn't break the deadlock in the second leg against Villarreal. Mikel Arteta's side were 2-1 down from the first leg, but had an away goal, so just needed one to go through. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang struck the woodwork, but that was as close as it got. The Spanish side will now look to the final, which takes place later this month in Gdansk. And Dan Evans missed out on a place in the quarter-finals of the Madrid Open and a meeting with Rafael Nadal after a straight sets defeat by Alexander Zverev. The British #1 paid the price for a one-sided first set as he was beaten 6-3, 7-6.
News Radio UK. For the latest news in Edinburgh, listen on your smart speaker.
Following the impasse between the French and UK governments over fishing rights off the Channel Island of Jersey, the EU has called for calm. Spokesperson Daniel Ferry says diplomacy needs to work to resolve the issues.
We are now engaging in good faith with the UK to try and solve the situation. That's the point that we're at right now, and I don't think it would be right for me or for us to say anything else beyond that point.
A girl's been arrested after she shot 2 students and a custodian at her Idaho school before being disarmed by a teacher. Officials told a news conference that the 3 are expected to survive their injuries. The 6th grade pupil pulled a handgun from her backpack and fired multiple rounds both inside and outside Rigby Middle School in the small city of Rigby in the US. Japan will expand and extend a state of emergency in Tokyo and other areas to the 31st of May. Coronavirus is continuing to spread in the country, and uncertainty is growing about safely holding the Olympics in just 11 weeks' time. The Maldives' first president, Mohamed Nasheed, has been injured in an explosion outside his home and taken to hospital. The 53-year-old, who's the current parliament speaker and was the country's first some of the terror that was widespread under the rule of the so-called Islamic State group has been ordered off-air. The show's cancellation followed widespread outrage from viewers. And Coldplay have premiered their new single with the help of French astronaut Thomas Pesquet, who's on board the International Space Station. A special performance of Higher Power was sent up to the ISS, where it was given its first plane.
Showbiz.
Dame Darcy Bussell has ruled out a permanent return to Strictly, but says it would be lovely to be back as a guest judge. The ballerina joined the judging panel full-time in 2012 after making several guest appearances. Dame Darcy has organised a gala at the Royal Albert Hall, which will showcase 8 British ballet companies that will take place in June. So Ian McKellen says his work improved after he came out. The actor revealed his sexuality back in 1988 and says that after that point he could be himself, noting that up until then his acting was really him being in disguise. A boost for the live music scene with a new survey finding the majority of music fans would be happy to show COVID certification to attend the live event. Some 75% of people surveyed say they have no problem being asked to show evidence of a negative test or vaccination, as long as they're allowed in. And Ed Sheeran's been announced as the new shirt sponsor for Ipswich Town Football Club. He grew up in Framlington, just outside the town. He's agreed an initial 1-year deal.
Business.
New figures suggest that retailers are unlikely to see returns to pre-pandemic numbers of customers anytime soon, despite the beginnings of a recovery after non-essential shops reopened. Total UK footfall for the month to the 1st of May remained 40% down on the same month in 2019, despite the reopening of retail according to the BRC Sensomatic IQ figures. Retail parks continue to fare better than shopping centres and high streets as they benefited from large stores, more space and on-site parking. The UK must use new laws to ensure online platforms have a legal responsibility to protect users from an avalanche of scams. That's according to a coalition of groups who've written an open letter to the government. The 17 groups have urged politicians to include scams in the proposed online safety bill, which could be announced in next week's Queen's speech. And Sainsbury's has hired the former boss of John Lewis, Paula Nichols, to take charge of its clothing and homeware operations. She's taking over in June from Mike Look.
Cast your mind back. Does this sound familiar?
So, you're looking for a risk-free investment? Transfer your savings into our stocks and shares ISA. You won't lose money. Probably.
For many, it's painfully familiar. If you've lost money on a stocks and shares ISA or investment bond missold by a bank, as a claims management company, Goodwin Barrett could get to the truth and deliver you compensation. You could do all this yourself and refer to the financial ombudsman for free, but there are so many other things you may want to do with your time. So text LOST to 78900. That's LOST to 78900. Time for some truth.
News Radio UK. Weather.
Sunny spells with just isolated light showers this afternoon, locally heavy at times with a risk of hail. It should be a little warmer today than yesterday.
Travel.
Problems on the M1 northbound around Leicester junctions 21A to 22, but around 40 minutes of queuing traffic. Just due to the accident which happened earlier on. On the M3 westbound junction 2 to 3 coming away from the M25, we've got a vehicle on fire there. 2 lanes closed as a result. In Lancashire, major problems on the A56. It delays southbound past Haslingden towards Ewood Bridge. This is because of the M66 being closed from Edenfield through to Junction 1. Busy on the surrounding areas as a result. And the Forth Road Bridge remains closed in both directions for essential maintenance work today. Diversions via the Queensferry Crossing. That's the latest. I'm Roy Martin.
Has described early election results for the Tories as very encouraging.
I know that the results have been coming in since this morning and clearly a lot more to go, and it's early days, but a very encouraging set of results so far. And I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities, bouncing back from the pandemic as far as we can, getting through it.
Well, key figures in Labour on Labour's left say the party must now change direction. Where has it all gone wrong for Labour? Let's speak with Matthew Doyle, former special advisor to Prime Minister Tony Blair. Afternoon to you, Matthew. Let's pick up on the obvious question. Where has it gone wrong?
Well, I think this is a result that's been some time coming. On one level, it is just the trend of the 2019 general election delayed, and Labour only just managed to hold on in Hartlepool in 2019 because the Conservative Party and Brexit Party vote was split and Labour managed to come through the middle. But I don't mean that to sound like I'm complacent or dismissing the result. Clearly it's a disappointing result for the Labour Party. It raises some serious questions about where the Labour Party needs to go next. And for me, I think the message that it sends is that Keir Starmer said earlier this week that the Labour Party had a mountain to climb. And what this tells Labour members is that if they thought Keir was referring to Ben Nevis, it's more like Everest.
Yes.
It's doable, but there must now be no underestimation or equivocation about the scale of challenge that is required to get us back in sync with the British public.
Yeah, and what it's interesting. What does that sync look like? I wonder, Matthew. And I'm hearing, people that I'm sure you're not on the Christmas card list of Owen Jones and Paul Mason, but you take my point. I'm hearing these guys talking about how we need to get the Corbyn vibe back in the party and bring Caroline Lucas into a shadow cabinet, the kind of Green coalition. You think, man alive, have these guys learned nothing? I mean, this was the most spectacular Labour defeat since the 1930s under the previous administration for Labour, and there are people agitating to return to that. I mean, as a Blair man, what do you make of it?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that the Labour Party has unfortunately
set of results so far, and I think that's really because
That's Liam MacArthur, a newly re-elected MSP for Orkney. Let's cross now to Dumfries, our reporter. Conor Gillis is there. Conor, I'm probably interrupting your lunch break now as well, but what's going on where you are?
Yeah, not at all. We are here in DG1, the big leisure complex here in Dumfries at the moment, and counting has just got underway in the last half an hour or so for the Dumfriesshire constituency down here in the south of Scotland. It is a much calmer affair, as other colleagues have been saying this afternoon, to do with COVID and the setup of the hall here. I spoke to the returning officer as well in the last hour, and she was saying that usually there would be more than 100 people counting the votes here today. There are just 56. It is a very much a more drawn out process, and this is very much a seat to watch this afternoon, because the Conservatives won this in 2016. It was a very tight margin though for Oliver Mundell, who did win this seat, just around 1,200 votes in it. Second was the SNP Joan McAlpine. Will this seat switch to yellow today? Well, we'll find out in just a matter of hours' time. I did speak to David Mundell, Oliver Mundell's father, was the former Scottish Secretary. He was saying it was too early to give an indication as to how things were looking. I also spoke to Joan McAlpine, the SNP candidate. She seemed quite nervous again, though, saying things were too early to conclude. Tomorrow we've got the other constituency down here, Galloway and West Dumfries, and also all eyes on that south of Scotland regional list, where we have got big names including the former MP George Galloway standing for the All for Unity party. Will he break through? Will he get a seat and make his way into Holyrood? We'll find out tomorrow. But certainly all eyes this afternoon on the Dumfriesshire count.
Thank you very much, Conor. That's Conor Gillis in Dumfries, and we're going to journey all the way to Newton Mearns now, and our reporter Lucy White is at the Eastman count. Lucy.
Hi there, Andrew. Yes, we are now being told we're going to expect a declaration here some point post 4 p.m. We were hopeful of a 4 p.m. declaration, but it's looking like that's going to be a little bit later. This is currently held by the Conservatives, but it's been really, really competitive in the past. In 2016, for instance, the Conservatives, Labour, the SNP, they all polled above 30%. Now, the sitting MSP is Jackson Carlaw, who many people know was the former leader of the Scottish Conservatives. He was the leader for a time last year, and he's hoping that the rapport he has with the people here, the relationship he has with the people here, he's been an MSP for quite some time in general, he's hoping that that relationship will get him over the line. Now, this is a key target for the SNP. The current MP here is an SNP MP, although in the past it's bounced around between Labour, the Conservatives and the SNP. This is a key target for them, and if they were to win here, it could really make a difference. It could be an indication, at least, of them heading towards a majority. It's going to be a difficult ask. So far. Obviously, nothing official yet, but speaking to people here on the ground, quiet confidence so far from the Conservatives, but we'll have to wait and see. That was certainly initially when they were counting postal votes. Traditionally, they might be more of a Conservative voting faction, so we'll just have to wait and see how things go here, but it's very, very interesting to see how it's going to play out through the day, and certainly a lot of eyes are watching it closely.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy. That's Lucy White, who's at the count in Eastwood for us. Let's speak once again to our political correspondent, Kirsten Campbell. And Kirsten, we've heard from some of the counts there, but what are the real key seats that we should be looking out for in the next year or so?
Well, Dumbarton is the most marginal seat in Scotland, where Jackie Baillie, Labour's deputy leader, has been the MSP since 1999, but she has a majority of just 109 votes, so not a lot in it. And what we've seen so far is that the SNP's votes seem to be going up, as do the Conservatives. So, you know, the SNP will be hoping to take that seat, and Jackie Baillie hoping to hold on to it, though she is number one on the list, so it wouldn't mean that she was out of Parliament if she did. At Edinburgh Central is another key SNP target seat. The party's Westminster leader, former Westminster leader Angus Robertson, seeking to gain that seat. It was Ruth Davidson's seat. She is obviously vacating it for the House of Lords. East Lothian, worth watching too. The former Labour leader Ian Gray hung on to it last time. He is standing down at this election, and the SNP do fancy their chances there. One question mark about that is whether Kenny McCaskill's defection to the Alba party will have an impact on voters. He was of course elected as the SNP MP for that area at the last election. Will those voters who backed him feel like their vote was taken for granted? Will they switch? Will they stay at home? Those questions remain to be answered. Other seats, Rutherglen, Labour we're quite hopeful. It's not looking like their votes increased that much, so that might be a challenge. But the Westminster MP for that area, Margaret Ferrier, has been suspended from the party. From the SNP, she had appeared in court charged with culpable and reckless conduct after testing positive for COVID. That may be a factor there. And then the Lib Dems would love to win Caithness, Sutherland and Ross and Toad. The chat from that count is that it's too close to call there. It is currently held by the SNP, but Gail Ross is standing down to find a better work-life balance, and the Children's Minister, Mary Todd, is the candidate contesting that seat and will be to hold on to it for the SNP.
Okay, thank you for now, Kirsten. Let's cross to Stornoway and speak to Donald Munro. What's the latest for you, Donald?
Well, the pandemic has not only robbed us of an overnight encounter here, the drama of that, but it's also prepared to traditional dash midnight flight of boxes from Uist and Barra. They came up via the ferry this morning at the Sound of Harris, and it's really ferries have dominated the campaign here. The people are concerned and upset about the deterioration of the ferry service, especially in the last few months, and an ageing fleet, and also new government procured vessels have taken are delayed by a number of years. So that the quick question here was what impact, if any, that would have on incumbent SNP MSP Alistair Allan's 3,500 yearly majority from 2016. Looking around me, I feel like the SNP activists are quite relaxed about what impact that will have. Labour in second place, the candidate Sean Fraser, hopeful his vote will go up. Turnout here, across the country, is up. A record here for a Scottish parliamentary election of 66%. Now, we were hoping for a declaration. It said 15 minutes ago, being 20 minutes, but we're in Lewis time here, so it might be a few minutes yet, but stay tuned for a declaration shortly.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Donald. That's Donald Munro. Continuing coverage of the Scottish election on BBC Radio Scotland.
SNP seats, but there is going to be definitely one new MSP, and that will be in Renfrewshire North and West, because that was the seat that was held by the former Finance Secretary Derek Mackay. Now, you might remember just before the budget in February 2020, a newspaper broke a story that Derek Mackay had been sending messages to a 16-year-old boy. Now, there was never any criminal action action taken, but he was suspended from the SNP and he later resigned. He's carried on, though, as an independent until now, so there will be a new person in that seat. Now, we're hearing from people talking around the floor that the incumbent party, which was the SNP, are pretty confident, and we're hearing that about the other seats as well. I mean, Derek Mackay had a majority of 7,000 in this seat, and of course with the turnout up, that's looking possibly very good for them, although as we've been hearing in the conversations this morning, turnout, what does that mean? Does an up turnout really pointing at more work that has been done by whatever party? So that'll be an interesting one to see what happens there. There's a councillor standing there, Natalie Dawn, and she's being contested. Kate's second before was the Tories there, that was Julie Peroni. So that'll be an interesting one to watch later today. And of course Paisley as well, which is held by George Adam of the SNP. So we'll see what happens. It certainly is busy. People are very excited about it, and they're excited about the turnout being up. Now, the other seat that's going to be counted here is Renfrewshire South. We'll get that tomorrow. We think probably about tomorrow lunchtime. And then, of course, there's that all-important West of Scotland list. Now, some big names on that, so if they're not successful in their constituencies, then we'll see the likes of Jackie Baillie and Jackson Carlaw, names like that